Hello and welcome to unit tests lesson. In this video, I will give an overview of unit testing and PHP unit in general, while creating basic unit test and then creating more advanced unit test with help of Magento testing framework. Let's go to our module for tests. First, I would like to create test directory inside the module and unit directory under it. Here, all unit tests related to this module should be located. And let's take a look at the class that we'll cover first. It's LuckyInfo. This class doesn't have a constructor, so it doesn't have any dependencies, and it will be very easy to cover with unit test. Basically, it has just one public function that we'll test, and the private function will be covered by the test of public function. So we'll create another directory called model to keep the same path as the class under test, and I'll create a PHP file called LuckyInfo test. So the class with the same name as the class under test, but with test suffix. I will put some prepared stuff to this class. Basically, our LuckyInfo test extends PHP unit framework test case. Also, I added a usage of original class to mention it in PHP doc for the property we will assign this class to. First, we'll use setup PHP unit function that is executed before each test is triggered. In this function, we are going to assign an instance of class under test to our property. As our class doesn't have any dependencies, it can be created with new operator in a unit test. So new LuckyInfo. No arguments here. Then we'll switch to test function. Each test function should start with test prefix. And here I'm using the method name that we are testing. Basically, I'll just use assert equals call from PHP unit framework test case. I would assert that true should be returned from the call of the class under test is amount lucky, and I need to specify some lucky amount like 54.45. Let's run this test. Okay, test passes, everything is okay. But now I would like to extend this test a bit and use it for testing negative scenario as well, when the expected result is false. For this purpose, I will use data provider. It's a feature of PHP unit, so I will create public function amount provider. It can have any unique name, and I will return an array. Each provider function should return arrays of arguments for test function. And let's think which arguments would we like to get in our test function. First, I think it's expected result or is lucky. And second will be the amount. So first I will create a dataset for lucky amount. Let's call it lucky. And is lucky will be true. Amount will be 65.56. Second, not lucky. Is lucky is definitely false. Let's think about amount. Let it be 66.56. Okay, to use data provider for test, we have to specify data provider annotation. So data provider and the name of data provider function. Let's now run the test. Test passed, and we see that both test cases were executed, and it's lucky and not lucky. Now let's try to cover more complex class with a unit test. If we'll take a look on order LuckyInfo, it has just one function, isOrderLucky, and this function doesn't have much logic in it, so it just proxies to other classes. So I would better cover order success block that has a condition, and that's why it has some business logic that should be covered with unit tests. However, as you can see, it extends abstract block and it implements protected function to HTML. We're going to test public function to HTML, where this protected function is called. First, we'll create a directory named block inside unit. Then I'll create a PHP file called order success test. Finally, I will paste some prepared content, including usages of luck_info model, order success block, object manager helper from test framework, you'll see how we use it, and Magento checkout model session. That is the session that is used in target class for getting last order. Properties for the class under test, luck_info and session that we'll need to mock. Also setup function for setting up the instance and test function where the actual test will happen. First, let's create our mocks and prepare instance under test. So I would like to get object manager, and I'll do this by calling object manager new object manager, and we'll pass the actual test case to the object manager. As I said before, that object manager is an instance of Magento framework, test framework, unit helper, object manager. Now I will prepare classes under test, and first I will create a luck_info with this getMock, and we'll put class here, Sevashenko lucky object, lucky order model luck_info. Second, session. For session, I would like also to disable constructor. I prefer to do it using the argument for getMock function. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth argument should be false. Now I'm going to create the instance of the block, and I'll do this with object manager getObject. First pass class name of the block. You can copy class name from references using Shift-Option-Command-C. And second, I have to pass arguments. It's optional. And I don't need to pass all arguments to the object, because object manager from test framework will pass any required arguments to the target class, mocking them by default. All methods of dependencies for the class under tests will be returning null, so just null mock. First, luck_info, and then session. However, the order doesn't matter here. Now, let's take a look on what should we mock here. So, here we have additional object used inside the method. This object is order, and we have to mock this order as well for particular test. So let's go back to test and create a mock for order. I would like to disable constructor for this class as well, and I would like to mock the function that we are calling from order, and this function is getGrandTotal. First, I would create amount variable and set some amount, let it be 124. So we are expecting one call from order of method get grand total, and it should return the amount. Now we are getting the actual order from session. So I would like to mock session to expect one call of method get last real order, and it will return the order. Finally, I would like to mock LockInfo method also once. The method name is amountLucky. This method should expect to get amount, and it will return, let's say, true. Now we can test that our block to HTML method will provide us with, let's take a look, if LockInfo will return true, we'll see your order is lucky phrase as the output of toHTML method. So we'll put it here. And now let's test our class. Test passes, but as for previous class, I would like to test both scenarios, just to cover all the code. And for this purpose, I will create a data provider. I will call it Lucky Provider. So, what should it return? Let's think. The output of our block to HTML function depends on the output of LockInfo is amountLucky function. So, as a first argument for our test, I will specify the return of isAmountLucky function. So it would be isLucky. And second, I would like to provide the result HTML as an argument, because it depends on isLucky argument. So for data provider, first, if the amount is lucky, we're expecting to get phrase. If the amount is not lucky, we'll get empty string. We have to add that data provider to annotation. And let's run a test. Good. So we just tested two classes of our module, covered them with unit tests, both with positive and negative scenarios, and that's great. And in the next video, we'll talk about integration tests.